Not all those who wander are lost. Confusion, isolation, darkness, and disorientation are often imagined as signs of being trapped, as though one has entered a space with no clear exit. This inner landscape is frequently described as a labyrinth, a place assumed to be complex, misleading, and impossible to escape. Yet this assumption itself is part of a misunderstanding. In modern language, the word labyrinth is casually used as a synonym for maze, but this equivalence is inaccurate. The original meaning of the labyrinth was never about being lost. Over centuries, its symbolism has been reshaped, simplified, and distorted, which is perhaps inevitable for a symbol that touches the deepest layers of human experience. The labyrinth is an archetype, a primordial image rooted in the collective memory of humanity. Its origins stretch back to the Bronze Age, making it one of the oldest known symbolic forms. Long before written language, humans carved labyrinth patterns into rock surfaces, etched them into stone, and placed them in sacred contexts. Across prehistoric Europe, these early forms appear in petroglyphs, sometimes accompanied by images of animals, such as deer or other wild creatures, suggesting connections to hunting rituals, magic, or survival practices. In other regions, labyrinths were carved into massive stones or placed near burial sites, implying associations with death, rebirth, and the journey beyond life. Some ancient labyrinths were found in tombs, hinting that they may have symbolized the soul's passage into the afterlife. Others depict human figures standing within the labyrinth with raised arms, as though engaged in prayer or ritual surrender. These earliest forms were not decorative puzzles. They were symbolic pathways, representations of transformation, initiation, and spiritual transition. Later, labyrinths were physically constructed using stones and boulders, particularly in Nordic regions and parts of Russia. Many of these structures date back to the late Middle Ages, yet they preserved a much older symbolic logic. They were not designed to confuse the walker, but to guide them through a predetermined journey. Across time, the labyrinth has appeared repeatedly in architecture, art, literature, and myth because it mirrors the structure of life itself. Life does not unfold in straight lines. It curves, doubles back, approaches meaning, then pulls away again. The labyrinth expresses this movement with precision. It embodies a path filled with uncertainty, darkness, and unexpected turns. If the traveler endures the journey, they are changed by it. If they resist or abandon it, life can feel empty, fragmented, or absurd. From within the labyrinth, perspective is limited. The walker cannot see the full design. The path feels restrictive, confusing, and repetitive. Yet from above, the labyrinth reveals extraordinary order and balance. Every turn has purpose. Every detour belongs to the pattern. This coexistence of confusion and order forms the central paradox of the labyrinth. It is both chaotic and structured at once. This paradox is one of the main reasons the symbol has been misunderstood. Many ancient cultures understood the labyrinth as a metaphor for existence. In Native American cosmology, the labyrinth symbolized the human life journey itself. The creator figure was often depicted as a being who enters the labyrinth, moves through its twists, and emerges when needed to guide others. Reaching the center was not an escape, but a moment of reflection. From that point, the individual could look back on the entire path they had taken. Completion was not survival alone, but understanding. Death itself was sometimes portrayed as the final transition at the center, where the soul passes into another realm. Crucially, the classical labyrinth differs fundamentally from the maze. The classical form contains only a single path. There are no choices to make, no dead ends, and no wrong turns. The traveler may feel lost, but they cannot truly lose their way. Progress is guaranteed, though often slow and psychologically demanding. The maze, by contrast, emerged much later in history. It is multi-cursal, filled with branching paths, false options, and traps. Its purpose is confusion. Where the labyrinth transforms, the maze disorients. This distinction carries deep psychological meaning. The labyrinth is associated with order, initiation, and inner development. The maze is associated with chaos, anxiety, and entrapment. Navigating a labyrinth requires endurance and trust in the process. Navigating a maze demands constant decision-making, vigilance, and fear of failure. Modern life increasingly resembles a maze rather than a labyrinth. Endless options, competing paths, and the pressure to choose correctly create chronic anxiety. Freedom itself becomes overwhelming. Existential thinkers describe this state as a form of dizziness. When possibilities multiply without structure, the individual feels suspended over an abyss. There is no single threat, only the awareness of infinite potential outcomes. This anxiety is not fear of something specific, but a profound sense of disorientation. One can lose oneself by clinging too tightly to immediate pleasures and finite concerns, or by escaping into abstract ideals while neglecting everyday responsibilities. Human existence requires balance between the finite and the infinite. Time itself can be understood as a labyrinth. Every decision creates divergence. Each path taken generates alternatives that continue to exist in parallel. Yet, these paths do not simply drift away forever. They intersect, converge, and influence one another in ways that cannot be fully perceived from within the journey. From the inside, life feels fragmented. From a wider perspective, it forms a coherent whole. There is no need to construct a labyrinth when existence itself already functions as one. Mythology gives this symbol psychological depth. In Greek myth, the labyrinth houses the Minotaur, a creature born from deception, repression, and unacknowledged guilt. The Minotaur represents the shadow, the parts of the psyche that are denied, feared, or hidden away. The labyrinth was built not merely to imprison the monster, but to keep it out of sight. The shadow does not disappear when ignored, it grows more dangerous. The hero who enters the labyrinth does not do so with certainty or strength alone. He carries a thread, a simple guide that ensures return. This thread symbolizes inner guidance, intuition, and fidelity to one's deeper truth. The task is not merely to kill the monster, but to confront what has been hidden. The journey to the center involves facing one's own darkness. Victory is not domination, but integration. After this confrontation, the hero cannot return unchanged. This descent and return pattern appears across cultures. Caves, initiation rites, and underground journeys symbolize entry into the unconscious. Darkness is not a mistake, it is a necessary stage of transformation. Alchemical traditions describe this process as a long, winding path rather than a direct descent. Wholeness demands engagement with suffering, imperfection, and contradiction. The most valuable transformations are inaccessible precisely because they demand sustained effort and honesty. The traveler often comes closest to abandoning the journey just before reaching the center. The strain of repeated disappointment and delayed resolution creates psychological pressure. Yet the absence of choice is what ensures progress. One must simply continue. In the labyrinth, the self is not lost, it is discovered. Reaching the center represents symbolic death and rebirth. The old identity dissolves, making space for a more integrated form of being. However, this moment is not the conclusion. The journey remains incomplete without return. Insight gained in isolation must be carried back into ordinary life. Transformation that does not re-enter the world remains unfinished. Throughout history, labyrinths were embedded into sacred architecture, especially during the Middle Ages. They appeared in churches and cathedrals as symbolic pilgrimages. Walking the labyrinth substituted for distant journeys, allowing individuals to enact a spiritual path within a confined space. Many described altered perceptions of time and space while walking these paths, as though the boundary between inner and outer worlds had blurred. The labyrinth thus became a liminal space, a threshold where ordinary distinctions dissolved. It symbolized the inner journey of the pilgrim, who seeks meaning in a confusing and morally fractured world. True peace was not found through external status or certainty, but through alignment of the inner self. When the heart becomes ordered, the world's confusion loses its power. Literary traditions repeated this theme. Pilgrims burdened by guilt, fear, or ignorance leave familiar structures behind and move through landscapes of despair, temptation, and loss. Helpers appear unexpectedly. Obstacles reveal inner weaknesses. The path remains narrow, demanding perseverance rather than brilliance. Liberation often arrives earlier than expected, but the journey continues, requiring humility and faith. The labyrinth ultimately encompasses multiple layers of meaning: the path of life, the descent into the unconscious, initiation, death and rebirth, the search for the self, and the return with wisdom. Its message is not that life is easy or linear, but that confusion has purpose. The twists and turns are not errors. They belong to a greater pattern. When one recognizes this, suffering becomes meaningful. Happiness is not found by eliminating difficulty, but by understanding its role. Duty performed with sincerity brings quiet satisfaction. Neglect of inner work leads to misery, regardless of external success. The path to truth is solitary, yet those who commit to it are never entirely alone. When work is done honestly, unseen allies emerge. Through knowing oneself, one becomes connected to others, to nature, and to the deeper order of existence. What once appeared crooked gradually reveals its hidden alignment. The labyrinth does not straighten the path. It transforms the walker.